She first noticed the eviction notice before noticing the silence. It clung to her apartment door like a death sentence, stark white paper against peeling paint, the kind of official document that changes lives in an instant. Sarah Mitchell's fingers trembled as she peeled it away, already knowing what the words would say. 30 days, final warning, legal action pending. Inside, cardboard boxes formed a maze around the small living room, each one labeled in her careful handwriting. Kitchen, books, Emma's toys, the systematic organization of a life coming apart at the seams. Her daughter sat cross-legged on the floor, wrapping dishes in newspaper with the focused determination of a 10-year-old trying to be helpful, trying to be brave. Emma looked up, dark eyes too old for her face. "Mom, where will we go?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire neither of them could put out. Sarah opened her mouth, searching for an answer that wouldn't be a lie, when her phone vibrated against the kitchen counter. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Creditors had gotten creative lately. The voice on the other end belonged to a man who introduced himself as Harold Fisher, attorney at law, calling from Asheville, North Carolina. Sarah braced herself for another collection notice, another bill she couldn't pay, another consequence of choosing integrity over employment. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm calling regarding the estate of James Mitchell. I understand he was your uncle?" The name meant nothing. Sarah searched her memory, coming up empty. "I'm sorry, I don't know anyone named James Mitchell." "Your father's brother. He passed away 3 weeks ago. Heart attack, they say, though the circumstances were unusual." A pause, papers rustling. "According to his will, you're his sole beneficiary." Her father's brother. Sarah's chest tightened. Her father had died when she was 12, and she'd grown up with her mother's stories about his estranged family, people who'd cut him off for marrying below his station, for choosing love over money. She'd never met any of them. "There must be some mistake. I didn't even know I had an uncle." "He knew about you, left detailed instructions. You inherit a cabin and 40 acres in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Remote property, hasn't been occupied since his death." Another pause, heavier this time. "Ms. Mitchell, I should be honest. The property needs significant work. We're talking about a structure that's been minimally maintained for decades. No mortgage, but also no real market value in its current condition." Sarah's mind raced. A cabin, land, no mortgage. It wasn't money, but it was something, more than she had now. "There's one more thing. Mr. Mitchell's will includes a specific message for you." Paper crinkled through the phone line. Quote, "Everything you need is in the stones beneath your feet." End quote. Fisher cleared his throat. "Does that mean anything to you?" Stones beneath your feet. Sarah's geological training sparked to life despite years of trying to bury it. That wasn't random phrasing. That was specific, deliberate. "When can I see the property?" 2 days later, she guided her 15-year-old Honda up a winding mountain road. Emma pressed against the passenger window, watching pine trees blur past. The eviction notice sat folded in Sarah's purse like a ticking clock. They had 28 days left in the apartment, 28 days to figure out if a cabin she'd never seen could become home. The GPS died 2 miles from the property, signal lost to the mountain's indifference. Sarah navigated by instinct in Fisher's printed directions, turning onto a dirt road that looked more like a suggestion than a path. Branches scraped the car's sides, nature reclaiming what humans had temporarily borrowed. Then the cabin emerged through the trees, and Sarah's stomach dropped. The photographs Fisher had emailed hadn't lied, but they'd been kind. The structure sagged in the middle like a broken spine, roof shingles missing in patches that let in rain and rot. Windows were either broken or so filthy they might as well be. The porch listed at an angle that defied physics in building codes. Moss claimed half the exterior walls. The whole thing looked ready to surrender to gravity and time. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt, face lit with something Sarah hadn't seen in months. Wonder. "Mom, it's perfect." "Honey, it's falling apart. It's like a fairy tale cottage." Emma was already out of the car, feet crunching on gravel, eyes taking in the property with a child's ability to see potential instead of problems. "We could fix it up. Make it pretty." Sarah followed more slowly, her trained eye cataloging structural issues with every step. Foundation cracking, water damage, probable mold. The cost to make this livable would dwarf anything in her bank account, which currently held $247. The front door hung crooked on rust-eaten hinges. Sarah pushed it open and the smell hit her first. Dust and decay and the particular scent of abandonment, places where human presence had faded to memory. Inside was worse. Furniture covered in stained sheets, floors thick with grime, cobwebs draped like funeral shrouds. Evidence of small animals nesting in corners, a wood stove that hadn't seen fire in years. Emma darted past her, exploring with fearless enthusiasm. "There's a bedroom! And another one! And look, Mom, stairs!" Sarah moved through the space mechanically, noting the crack in the chimney, the buckled floorboards, the ancient wiring that probably hadn't been updated since the 1970s. This wasn't a home. This was a liability wrapped in nostalgia and impossible hope. She found Emma in what must have been the main bedroom, the girl kneeling beside an old wooden chest, hands dusty from pulling it out from under the bed. "Look what I've found." The chest was solid hardwood, hand-carved with geometric patterns, age darkening it to near black. The kind of craftsmanship that didn't exist anymore, when people built things to last generations. Emma's fingers worked at the latch, and Sarah felt a strange pull in her chest. Something important lived in that box. The lid creaked open on protesting hinges. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a leather-bound journal, its pages thick and warped with age and handling. Beside it, a stack of photographs held together with a rubber band that crumbled at Emma's touch. And underneath everything, folded carefully, geological survey maps with official stamps and faded ink. Sarah's hands moved without conscious thought, reaching for the maps. She unfolded them across the dusty floor, and her professional training roared back to life. These were real surveys, legitimate documentation from the U.S. Geological Survey, dated 1984, topographical analysis, mineral composition studies, core sample results. Someone had made careful notations in the margins, precise handwriting marking specific coordinates, circling particular formations, adding calculations that made Sarah's pulse quicken despite herself. Emma held up one of the photographs. "Who's this?" A man in his 50s stared back from the image, weathered face split by a genuine smile, standing in front of this very cabin when it had been whole and cared for. He had their father's eyes. Sarah knew without being told that she was looking at Uncle James. More photos. James examining rocks with a hand lens. James with surveying equipment. James shaking hands with another man in formal dress. Both of them standing in front of a courthouse. That last one had a date written on the back. May 1987, the journal called to her. Sarah picked it up, the leather soft with years of handling, and opened to the first page. The same handwriting from the maps, but looser, more personal. January 15, 1984. Started survey work today on the property. Mitchell family land has been in our family since 1903, when my grandfather staked his claim during the mining boom. Everyone thought he was crazy, buying mountain acreage instead of valley farmland. But he saw something here. I'm beginning to think he was right. Sarah flipped forward, scanning entries. The journal spanned decades, a geological diary documenting James's amateur but meticulous study of his property. Technical observations mixed with personal reflections. And then, around March 1985, the tone shifted. The formation is more extensive than I initially believed. Core samples confirm what I suspected, but didn't want to accept. This is significant, potentially very significant. The kind of discovery that changes things. Question is, what do I do with this information? More pages, more internal debate. And then, June 1980, had a visit from Thomas Thornton today, the developer who's been buying up property in the valley. He was polite, charming even, made an offer on the land that was frankly insulting. When I refused, the charm evaporated. He said he'd looked at old county records, knew there was potential here, threatened legal action if I didn't sell. I showed him the door. Note to self, have all boundary markers surveyed and recorded. Men like Thornton don't take no for answers. They find other ways. Thornton. Sarah filed the name away, a detail that felt important, though she couldn't say why. Emma's voice interrupted her reading. "Mom, someone's coming." Sarah looked up, following her daughter's gaze through the grimy window. A figure approached on foot, an older man moving with the careful economy of someone who'd learned to conserve energy in harsh terrain. A dog walked beside him, a German shepherd with alert posture and intelligent eyes. Sarah's protective instincts flared. She moved between Emma and the door as the man reached the porch. His knock was firm, but not aggressive. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm Frank Carver. Your uncle asked me to keep an eye on the place." She opened the door cautiously. Up close, Frank Carver looked like he'd been carved from the same mountains that surrounded them. Late 60s, military bearing, eyes that had seen things he'd never talk about. The kind of face that belonged on old photographs labeled veteran or ranger or both. "I didn't know my uncle. He knew about you." Frank's gaze moved past her, taking in the cabin's interior, and something like grief crossed his features. "James and I served together in Vietnam. After, we both came to these mountains. Different reasons, same result. He was my closest friend for 40 years. The dog pressed against Frank's leg, regarding Sarah and Emma with calm assessment. Emma, never afraid of animals, held out her hand. "What's her name?" "Dakota. She's particular about people, so if she likes you, that means something." Dakota moved forward, sniffing Emma's hand, then her face. The dog's tail swept once, twice. Acceptance granted. Emma's face split into the first genuine smile Sarah had seen since the divorce papers arrived. Frank's attention shifted to Sarah, and his expression grew serious. "James left instructions. Said if anything happened to him, I should help you understand what you inherited. Not just the land and the cabin, but," he paused, choosing words carefully, "the responsibility that comes with them." "What kind of responsibility?" "The kind that takes time to explain. But first things first." He nodded toward the interior. "You planning to stay here?" Sarah thought about the eviction notice, the emptying bank account, the job interviews that went nowhere once potential employers Googled her name and found the whistleblower scandal. She thought about Emma's smile when Dakota licked her face, the first moment of happiness in a darkness that had swallowed them both. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Something in Frank's expression softened. Not pity, but understanding. The recognition one refugee offers another. "Then we've got work to do. This place won't make itself livable, and winter comes early in these mountains." He looked at Emma. "You any good with a hammer, young lady?" "I can learn." "That's the right answer." Frank smiled, and Sarah saw what her uncle must have valued in this man. Steadiness, reliability, the kind of presence that made chaos feel manageable. That first night, Sarah and Emma made beds from sleeping bags on the least damaged floor sections. The cabin creaked and groaned around them, settling into conversation with the wind. Emma fell asleep quickly, exhausted from exploring every corner of the property. Sarah lay awake, the journal open beside her flashlight, reading her uncle's life in reverse chronology. November 2019. Saw Sarah's name in the news today. Whistleblower case against her mining company. They're destroying her for telling the truth about unsafe conditions. She has her father's integrity. That's rare. Also dangerous. She'll understand someday why I'm leaving this to her. Not because of the geology degree, though that helps. Because she knows what it costs to choose right over easy. Sarah's throat tightened. A man she'd never met had watched her life from a distance, had known her in ways she hadn't known herself. The weight of that recognition pressed against her chest. She read until the flashlight batteries dimmed, then lay in darkness listening to Emma breathe and the mountains whisper their ancient indifference to human struggles. Morning arrived cold and bright. Emma was already awake, sitting on the porch with Dakota, who'd apparently appointed herself as the girl's guardian. Frank appeared shortly after sunrise, carrying supplies in a weathered backpack. Brought coffee, real coffee, not that instant nonsense, and propane for the stove. You'll need to get that chimney checked before you can use the wood stove safely, but we can work on that. Over breakfast, assembled from Frank's supplies and the granola bars Sarah had packed, she asked the question that had burned through the journal's pages. "What did my uncle find here?" Frank was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he spoke, his voice carried weight. "James found something that could have made him rich. Instead, he spent 30 years protecting it." "Protecting it from what?" From people who destroy this place to get at it. Frank's jaw tightened. Your uncle believes some things were more valuable left alone, that not everything worth finding should be found. Emma interrupted, pulling a stone from her pocket. Look what Dakota showed me by the creek. Isn't it pretty? Sarah took the stone, and her geologist's eye immediately cataloged its properties. Pale, translucent, hexagonal crystal structure, visible despite surface weathering. Light refraction patterns consistent with beryllium aluminum cyclosilicate. Her hands began to shake. Where exactly did you find this? Dakota was digging by the water. There are more there, lots of them. Sarah looked at Frank, and his expression confirmed what her training was screaming. This wasn't just pretty. This was valuable. Potentially very valuable. I need to see. Frank led them down a narrow path that wound through dense undergrowth. Dakota ranging ahead, Emma chattering about the trees and birds and everything that captured her inexhaustible attention. The creek emerged suddenly, a ribbon of cold clarity cutting through darker earth. Dakota went directly to a spot where erosion had exposed the bank, pawing at loose soil. Sarah knelt beside the dog, brushing away dirt with careful fingers. More stones appeared, each one making her heart beat faster. Not just surface scatter, these were weathering out of intact bedrock. She pulled a hand lens from her pocket, a habit from her old life that she'd never quite broken. Under magnification, the crystalline structure became unmistakable. High clarity, good color, minimal inclusions, gem quality. These are emeralds. Frank nodded slowly. James spent 2 years confirming it. Then he spent 28 years making sure nobody else did. Why? Because the main deposit isn't here. Frank gestured toward the cabin, invisible through the trees. It's there, under the foundation. James built his home on top of it, made the cabin itself the guardian. Sarah stood, legs unsteady, mind racing through implications and possibilities, and the crushing weight of understanding what she'd inherited. Not just a broken cabin and wild land, but a secret that could solve every problem she had. Or create worse ones. How much are we talking about? James estimated $15 to $30 million worth of gemstones. Could be more, could be less, but enough to make certain people very interested. Certain people? The Thornton family, for one. They've been trying to get this property since the 1980s. Thomas Thornton, the grandfather, made multiple attempts. When he died, his son tried. Now the grandson is making moves. Frank's expression hardened. They know something valuable is here. They don't know what exactly or where, but they know. Emma, who'd been listening with growing eyes, asked the question Sarah was afraid to voice. Are we rich? No, honey, we're responsible. Sarah met Frank's gaze. My uncle left this to me because he knew I'd understand. Some things aren't meant to be taken from the earth, even when we're desperate, especially then. Frank's approval was subtle but unmistakable. James chose well. They spent the afternoon beginning repairs, Frank teaching Sarah the basics of structural assessment, while Emma appointed herself as tool organizer. The work was hard, satisfying in ways Sarah's desk job had never been. Physical exhaustion that left no room for the anxiety that usually consumed her nights. By evening, they'd patched the worst roof leaks and replaced 2 broken windows with plywood Frank had brought. Small victories that made the cabin feel slightly less like it was actively trying to kill them. Frank was packing up his tools when a vehicle approached on the dirt road. Not Sarah's tired Honda. Something newer. Expensive. A Land Rover that had never seen actual rough terrain emerged into the clearing, gleaming even in the fading light. The man who stepped out wore casual clothes that cost more than Sarah's last month's salary. Late 50s, silver hair professionally styled, smile that probably played well at charity galas and county planning meetings. He approached with the confidence of someone used to being welcomed. You must be Ms. Mitchell. I'm Richard Thornton. I own the development company that's been working on projects throughout the valley. He extended his hand, and Sarah shook it on automatic politeness. His grip was firm, calculated. I heard you'd inherited James's property. Wanted to welcome you to the area. Frank appeared in the doorway, silent but present. Thornton's smile faltered slightly. Frank, still lurking around, I see. Still watching. Frank's tone held warning. Thornton's attention returned to Sarah, assessing her with quick precision, taking in her worn jeans, the dust on her hands, the uncertainty she couldn't quite hide, making calculations. I'll be direct, Miss Mitchell. This property has been on my family's radar for years. Beautiful land, but not practical for someone in your situation. He gestured toward the cabin. The repairs alone would bankrupt most people. I'm prepared to offer you $15,000, cash, right now. You could find somewhere decent to live, get your daughter into good schools. Start fresh. The condescension dripped like honey over poison. Start fresh. As if she hadn't already tried that, hadn't already lost everything trying to do the right thing. As if her current situation was failure rather than consequence of integrity. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Thornton, but I'm not interested in selling. His smile tightened. A single mother with no job. You need cash, not charity cases like this cabin. The kindness in his voice made the words cut deeper. I'm trying to help you avoid making a mistake. This land will drain your resources and give you nothing back. Sarah's pride flared, hot and defensive. Thank you for the concern, but my answer is no. Emma appeared beside her, small hand sliding into Sarah's. The girl's presence straightened Sarah's spine. She had her daughter to protect, to raise, to teach about standing firm when the world pushed. Thornton's charm evaporated like morning mist. You'll be back begging in 2 weeks. They always do. He turned toward his vehicle, then paused. Frank, you should know better than to encourage this. You remember what happens to people who try to make this place work. The threat hung in the air after he drove away, dust settling slowly back to earth. Frank's expression was grim. That went about how I expected. What did he mean about remembering what happens? James's death wasn't an accident. I can't prove it, but I know. Frank's hands clenched. Your uncle was careful. He knew every inch of this mountain. He didn't just fall in a ravine because he missed his footing. Cold spread through Sarah's chest. You think Thornton... I think powerful men don't like being told no, and I think we need to be very careful. He looked at Emma, then back to Sarah. You sure you want to stay, knowing what you're up against? Sarah thought about the journal, her uncle's decades of quiet protection, about Emma's smile when Dakota licked her face, about the eviction notice and the job blacklist and the long fall from respected professional to desperate single mother, about the choice between easy money and hard integrity. I'm sure. That night, after Emma was asleep and Frank had returned to his own cabin somewhere deeper in the mountains, Sarah examined the sealed room more carefully. Her uncle hadn't just preserved his work. He'd created a shrine to careful study, to methodical documentation, to the patient work of understanding something precious. She found more journals, earlier ones, documenting James's initial surveys, the gradual realization of what he'd discovered, the moment when professional excitement gave way to moral responsibility, notes about ecological impact, about preservation, about the difference between stewarding land and exploiting it. And she found letters, yellowed envelopes bundled with twine dated from 1987, correspondence between her uncle and Thomas Thornton, Richard's grandfather. The tone in the early letters was businesslike, offers to purchase, reasonable amounts. But as James continued refusing, the letters grew darker. Mr. Mitchell, you're being unreasonably stubborn about a simple business transaction. I've had the property surveyed, and I know what's beneath your land. You're sitting on a fortune and playing the noble hermit. Sell now while the offer stands, or I'll find other ways to acquire what should rightfully be developed. James's response, a carbon copy on onion skin paper. Mr. Thornton, this land is not for sale at any price. I don't care what your surveys showed. I don't care about your development plans. Some things are worth more than their monetary value. Leave me alone. The letters continued, Thornton's threats escalating until they stopped abruptly in 1908. Sarah could imagine why. Some battles you couldn't win through intimidation, so you waited. You bided time. You passed the obsession to your children and grandchildren like inheritance. She was reading the last letter when Emma's screams shattered the quiet. Sarah ran, heart and throat, finding Emma pressed against the bedroom window, pointing. Outside, Dakota barked furiously, and in the wash of moonlight, Sarah saw him. A man standing at the edge of the trees, watching the cabin, not moving, just watching. Then he turned and melted back into darkness as if he'd never been there. Sarah grabbed her phone, but there was no signal. She tried the landline Frank had mentioned, found it dead. They were alone in the mountains with someone watching, and help was miles away through darkness in unfamiliar terrain. She pulled Emma close, locked the doors, and sat awake until dawn with a hammer in her lap, listening to every sound the night offered. Frank appeared at first light, Dakota at his side. His expression said he already knew. Saw boot prints near the property line. Fresh, someone's been watching. He met Sarah's eyes. Thornton's making his move. They know you said no, so now they're trying to scare you into yes. It's working. Good. Fear means you're thinking clearly. Frank set down a backpack filled with supplies, but we don't let it win. We just get smarter. Over the next week, a pattern emerged. Every night, evidence of watchers. Moved stakes marking property boundaries. Tools that went missing and reappeared elsewhere. Small sabotages. Nothing they could prove. Everything designed to create pressure. Sarah worked on the cabin with increasing desperation, trying to make it livable before winter, before money ran out, before fear made her fold. Emma helped with quiet determination, the girl growing more attached to the land, and Dakota with each passing day. And Sarah read. Every night, James's journals, learning her uncle's story, understanding the weight of what he'd protected. The deposit under the cabin wasn't just valuable, it was extraordinary. A geological formation so rare that legitimate scientific interests would demand study, while corporate greed would demand extraction. James had chosen preservation. And now that choice was Sarah's burden. The call came 9 days after she'd refused Thornton's initial offer. Fisher, the lawyer, his voice tense. Ms. Mitchell, I need to inform you that Richard Thornton has filed a claim with the county. He's alleging boundary disputes and setback violations. It's clearly harassment, but you'll need to respond, officially, which means legal fees. Sarah's stomach dropped. How much? Minimum $2,000 to start, possibly more if he escalates. I'm sorry, this is a common tactic with his family. $2,000 she didn't have, couldn't get, wouldn't have even if she sold her car, which she needed to eventually find work. She sat on the cabin's porch that evening, Emma asleep inside, staring at the mountains that had become both sanctuary and prison. The stones beneath her feet held millions. Her daughter needed stability, education, a future that wasn't defined by her mother's stubborn principles. Frank found her there, settling beside her with the comfortable silence of someone who understood the weight of impossible choices. Your uncle left one more thing. I didn't mention it because I wanted you to choose this path for yourself, not because you felt obligated. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Letter addressed to you. He gave it to me the week before he died. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it. James's handwriting, steady and clear. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, you've discovered what I protected. You're probably scared, probably broke, probably tempted to sell. I chose you because you're the only family member who understands. Some things are worth more than money. This land, these stones, they're not just minerals. They're proof that something beautiful can exist without being exploited. You lost your job because you tried to protect people from corporate greed. Now I'm asking you to protect this place from the same thing. I know it's hard. I know you have Emma to think about. But please consider, what lesson do you want to teach your daughter? That we sell out when things get tough, or that we fight for what's right? Whatever you decide, know that I believe in you. You're stronger than you think. Love, Uncle James. Sarah read it twice, then a third time. A man she'd never met had known her better than she knew herself, had trusted her with his life's work, his greatest secret, his deepest conviction. She thought about Emma asking if they were rich, about teaching her daughter that some fortunes weren't meant to be spent, about integrity as inheritance. I need to document everything. Make copies, create insurance. Sarah looked at Frank. If something happens to us, if Thornton gets bold, I want the truth to go public. Every survey, every letter, every threat. Frank's approval was quiet but absolute. I know someone at the state university, geologist I trust. We send him a package, sealed and dated. If you disappear, if anything happens, he knows what to do with it. They spent the next day photographing James's work. Every journal page, every map, every letter from Thornton. Sarah added her own geological assessment, professional documentation that made the deposit's value impossible to deny. Emma helped, treating it like a treasure hunt, not understanding that they were building evidence against future violence. The package went out by registered mail, addressed to Professor Martin Chen at NC State. Sarah felt marginally safer knowing the truth existed outside these mountains. That night, the vehicles came. Not one, but three. Headlights cutting through darkness, engines loud with expensive power. Sarah pulled Emma inside, locked the doors, killed the lights. Through the window, she watched Richard Thornton emerge, flanked by a woman in expensive business attire and two men who looked like they solved problems with muscle. Thornton's voice carried clearly. "We need to talk, tonight, or things get very unpleasant." Sarah's heart hammered. Emma clutched her hand, trying to be brave, failing. Dakota's barking grew frantic outside. Frank appeared from the darkness, stepping into the headlights with a rifle held casually but not carelessly. "Private property. Leave. This doesn't concern you, old man. Everything concerning this property concerns me." Frank's voice was steady, carrying the authority of someone who'd faced worse threats in worse places. "You're trespassing, and I'm a witness to intimidation. Leave now or I make calls to people who will actually care." Thornton studied him, making calculations. The woman beside him leaned close, whispered something urgent. After a long moment, Thornton smiled. Cold, patient. "You have 48 hours. Sell or I file injunctions, lawsuits, code violations. Every day will cost you money you don't have. Every hour will make your situation worse." He looked directly at the darkened window where Sarah stood hidden. "Think about your daughter, Miss Mitchell. Think about what kind of life you're giving her." The vehicles pulled away, leaving only dust and the echo of threat hanging in the mountain air. The 48 hours passed like water through cupped hands. Sarah spent them in motion, refusing to let stillness become surrender. She contacted every authority Fisher suggested, leaving messages that went unreturned, navigating bureaucracies that seemed designed to protect people like Thornton rather than people like her. The State Geological Survey was interested but bound by processes that measured time in months. The EPA needed documented environmental violations before opening investigations. Historical preservation required proof of significance beyond her uncle's private journals. Every door she knocked on opened onto another hallway of waiting. Frank brought news from town, his veterans network picking up intelligence that civilian channels missed. Thornton was mobilizing. County planning board meetings, quiet conversations with the sheriff, pressure applied through social connections that ran deeper than law. Emma grew quieter each day, sensing the storm building around them. She stayed close to Dakota, drawing comfort from the dog's steady presence. At night, Sarah heard her daughter crying softly, trying to muffle the sound so her mother wouldn't worry. That fear, more than Thornton's threats, hardened Sarah's resolve into something unbreakable. Her daughter would learn that standing firm mattered more than standing comfortable. On the morning of the third day, Fisher called. His voice carried defeat before he spoke words to match. Thornton filed an eminent domain claim. He's arguing the mineral deposits represent significant public economic interest. Says developing them would create 200 jobs, generate substantial tax revenue. A pause heavy with apology. The county board is sympathetic to his argument. There'll be a hearing in 3 days. You need legal representation. How much? Minimum $5,000 to mount a proper defense. More if he brings multiple attorneys, which he will. $5,000. Sarah's laugh came out sharp and bitter. She had $300 left after buying supplies to winterize the cabin. The eviction notice back in her apartment felt like ancient history now, a problem from someone else's life. "I'll represent myself." Fisher's silence stretched long enough to become its own answer. Finally, "Ms. Mitchell, I admire your courage, but this isn't advisable. Thornton will have professionals who know every legal mechanism to, I don't have $5,000. I barely have 500. So I either represent myself or I lose by default." Sarah watched Emma through the window, the girl kneeling beside Dakota, braiding wildflowers into the dog's fur. "I've already lost one battle by staying quiet. I won't lose another." Frank appeared that afternoon with unexpected reinforcements. 3 men in their 70s, all carrying the same military bearing, all wearing expressions that suggested they'd seen worse odds and survived them. My unit, Vietnam, 68 and 69. Frank gestured to each in turn. Carl, Marcus, Joseph. They remember what it means to defend ground that matters. Carl, the tallest, extended a weathered hand. Frank says you're fighting Richard Thornton. That family's been a cancer in this county for 3 generations. About time someone pushed back. They spent the afternoon teaching Sarah courtroom strategy like it was tactical warfare, how to present evidence clearly, how to anticipate arguments and counter them, how to stay calm when professionals tried to rattle her credibility. Frank's friends had fought enough battles, legal and otherwise, to recognize the patterns. Thornton will try to make you emotional, Marcus explained, his voice carrying the rasp of old cigarettes and older battles. He'll paint you as irrational, sentimental, incapable of making sound decisions. You counter by being nothing but facts. Cold, documented facts. Joseph added, and when he plays the public good card, you flip it. Ask who's good, exactly. Who profits? Follow the money. Make him defend his motives. Sarah absorbed their lessons, feeling pieces of herself reassemble into something harder than what graduate school had forged. Academia taught her to seek truth through evidence. These men taught her to defend truth against people who preferred convenient lies. That evening, organizing her case materials, Sarah found Emma in the sealed room. The girl sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by her uncle's journals, reading with fierce concentration. Mom, Great-Uncle James was really smart. He figured out how to protect something important, even though people wanted to take it. Emma looked up, eyes too wise for 10 years. Like you're protecting us, even though it's really hard. Sarah's throat tightened. She knelt beside her daughter, pulling her close. Baby, I need you to understand something. We might lose. Thornton has money, lawyers, connections. The court might rule against us. But we're right. Being right doesn't always mean winning. Emma's small hand found Sarah's. Great-Uncle James was right for 30 years. That's pretty good winning. The simplicity of that logic, the child's ability to measure success in persistence rather than outcomes, steadied something in Sarah's chest. Winning wasn't the only form of not losing. The night before the hearing, Frank knocked on the cabin door after Emma was asleep. His expression carried news he didn't want to deliver. Got word from a friend who works at the county courthouse. Thornton's bringing 4 attorneys, high-powered firm from Charlotte. They're not just fighting your claim, they're going for total legal destruction. Then they'd better bring lunch. It's going to take a while. Frank's smile was brief but genuine. Your uncle would have said something similar. Stubborn runs in your family. Stubborn is just determined wearing cheaper clothes. He handed her a folder, thick with papers. Dug up some public records. Thornton's development projects over the past 20 years. 6 properties acquired after original owners faced sudden financial crises or mysterious accidents. Patterns too consistent to be coincidence. Sarah flipped through the documentation, seeing the same story repeated with different names. Elderly couples who lost their farm after a barn fire. A widow who sold her lakefront property after her brakes failed on a mountain road. A family that relocated after repeated break-ins made them fear for their children's safety. He's done this before, multiple times, and gotten away with it every time. People who might testify disappear or change their minds. Evidence gets lost. Local law enforcement looks the other way. Frank's jaw tightened. Your uncle knew. That's why he documented everything, why he was so careful. James understood Thornton wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted or died trying. Or until someone stopped him. Be careful making yourself that someone. Stopping him might require becoming something you're not. Sarah thought about the whistleblower case, how exposing corporate negligence had transformed her from respected professional to industry pariah, how choosing integrity had cost her marriage, her career, her stability, how she'd do it again anyway because some prices were worth paying. I became that person 3 years ago. I just forgot for a while. The courthouse in Asheville was smaller than Sarah expected, a brick building that tried for dignity and achieved bureaucratic weariness. She arrived early, Emma and Frank flanking her like guards, Dakota waiting in the truck with windows cracked. Thornton's legal team arrived in a convoy of black SUVs, 4 attorneys in suits that cost more than Sarah's car, carrying briefcases thick with prepared arguments. Richard Thornton himself wore casual confidence, the expression of someone who'd already won and was simply going through formalities. He caught Sarah's eye across the parking lot, his smile cold with certainty. She met his gaze and held it, refusing to look away first. Small victories before the real battle. The hearing room was cramped, wooden benches scarred by decades of desperate people seeking justice through systems designed to process rather than protect. Judge Catherine Morrison presided, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that suggested she'd heard every lie worth telling. Thornton's lead attorney was a man named Preston Wells, whose opening statement painted a picture of economic salvation. Jobs for struggling families, tax revenue for underfunded schools, progress versus sentimentality, the public good versus private stubbornness. Your Honor, the Mitchell property contains mineral deposits worth millions. These resources could transform this county's economy, providing employment and opportunity for hundreds of families. Ms. Mitchell, through no fault of her own, lacks the resources to develop this land productively. Eminent domain exists precisely for situations where private ownership prevents public benefit. Wells spoke with practiced ease, making Thornton's greed sound like altruism, making Sarah's resistance sound like selfishness. When her turn came, Sarah stood with papers trembling slightly in her hands. She'd practiced this moment 100 times, but theory felt different than facing a judge who held her future in procedural decisions. Your Honor, this case isn't about economic development. It's about a family's 40-year attempt to acquire property through intimidation when legal purchase failed. She presented the letters between her uncle and Thomas Thornton, the grandfather's escalating threats. The Thornton family has known about these deposits since 1985. They've been trying to take this land ever since, Wells interjected smoothly. Ancient history, Your Honor, irrelevant to current circumstances. It's relevant because it establishes motive beyond public interest. Sarah pulled out Frank's research, the pattern of properties acquired under suspicious circumstances. Richard Thornton has a documented history of targeting land he wants, using legal pressure and intimidation when owners refuse to sell. 6 properties in 20 years, all following the same pattern. Judge Morrison leaned forward, interest sharpening her features. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Mitchell. Can you substantiate it? Public records, Your Honor. Property transfers, incident reports, timing of offers made before and after owners experience crises. Sarah spread the documents across the defense table. In every case, Mr. Thornton benefited from tragedies that happened to people standing between him and property he wanted. Thornton's attorneys moved quickly, filing objections, arguing relevance, trying to bury the accusations under procedural technicalities. But Judge Morrison raised a hand, silencing them. I'll review these materials. Continue, Ms. Mitchell. Sarah's confidence grew with each word, the geologist in her finding solid footing in evidence and documentation. My uncle spent 30 years studying this property's geology. His journals, his surveys, his careful documentation, all of it points to the same conclusion. These deposits are scientifically significant, yes, but they're also environmentally fragile. Mining them would require techniques that risk destabilizing the entire ridge system. She presented James's calculations, his predictions about geological consequences. My uncle wasn't being sentimental. He was being scientifically responsible. Some formations are too delicate to exploit without catastrophic risk. Wells countered with his own expert testimony, paid professionals who testified about safe extraction methods, minimal environmental impact, proper procedures. Their credentials outweighed Sarah's, their certainty backed by corporate resources she couldn't match. But when Wells tried to paint her as emotionally compromised, a desperate single mother making poor decisions under stress, Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not anger, but clarity. Your Honor, 3 years ago I was a senior geologist at Westfield Mining. I reported safety violations at their Copper Valley extraction site. The company buried my report, discredited my findings, destroyed my career. Her voice steadied, finding rhythm and truth. 6 months later, that site collapsed. 2 men died. The investigation confirmed every concern I'd raised. The courtroom went quiet. Even Wells paused, recalculating his strategy. I lost my job, my reputation, my marriage because I chose to protect people over profit. Mr. Wells wants to paint me as incompetent, as sentimental, as incapable of understanding what's at stake. Sarah looked directly at Judge Morrison. I understand exactly what's at stake. That's why I'm standing here. Judge Morrison studied her for a long moment, then shifted her attention to Thornton's team. Mr. Wells, your client's eminent domain claim requires demonstrating clear public benefit. What you've shown me is private profit disguised as public good. That's not the same thing. Your Honor, the jobs alone can be created through legitimate development elsewhere. Ms. Mitchell has raised serious questions about your client's motives and methods. Until those questions are answered satisfactorily, I'm not prepared to force property transfer. She brought her gavel down with finality. Eminent domain claim denied pending further investigation into the allegations presented today. This hearing is adjourned. The shock on Thornton's face was worth every sleepless night, every moment of fear, every doubt Sarah had swallowed down to get here. Not a victory, exactly, but not a defeat either. Ground held against superior force. In the parking lot afterward, Thornton caught up to her, Wells and another attorney flanking him like expensive armor. His charm had evaporated, replaced by something raw and dangerous. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. That little performance in there, it bought you nothing but time. And time runs out. Frank stepped between them, his presence a wall. Back off. Oh man, you can't protect them forever. Mountains are dangerous places. Accidents happen all the time. Thornton's gaze shifted to Emma, standing beside Sarah, trying to be brave and failing to hide fear, especially to children who wander where they shouldn't. The threat hung naked in afternoon light. Frank's hands clenched, but Sarah put a hand on his arm. Violence was what Thornton wanted, an excuse to play victim while destroying them through different channels. If anything happens to my daughter, the documentation I sent to NC State goes public. Every letter, every survey, every piece of evidence about your family's 40-year obsession with my land. Sarah's voice carried steel she didn't know she possessed. You'll spend the rest of your life explaining why you threatened a 10-year-old girl over gemstones. Thornton's smile turned glacial. We'll see who has more to lose. They drove back to the cabin in tense silence. Emma pressed against Sarah's side. The temporary victory felt hollow against Thornton's naked threat. Judge Morrison's denial had slowed him, not stopped him. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood on the cabin's porch, watching moonlight paint the mountains in shades of silver and shadow, and tried to calculate how much fight she had left. A vehicle approached up the dark road. Not Thornton's convoy, something smaller, more careful. Sarah tensed, ready to wake Frank, to grab Emma and run. A woman stepped out, alone, moving with the cautious energy of someone crossing dangerous lines. Even in darkness, Sarah recognized her from the courthouse. Jennifer Hayes, one of Thornton's attorneys. Ms. Mitchell, I need 5 minutes, please. I'm breaking attorney-client privilege being here, but there are things you need to know. Every instinct screamed trap, but desperation recognized opportunity, and Sarah was desperate enough to listen. Jennifer spoke quickly, words tumbling out like confession. She'd worked for Thornton for 8 years, handling acquisitions, managing legal intimidation, burying evidence when necessary. She'd been good at it, well compensated for her moral flexibility. But your daughter, today in the parking lot when he threatened her, Jennifer's voice cracked. I have a daughter, 9 years old, and I realized I've been helping a monster hurt families like yours because the money was good. She produced a folder, handed it to Sarah with trembling hands. Inside, documents from 1987, Thomas Thornton's private investigation into James Mitchell's property. Survey results confirming gemstone deposits. Legal memorandums discussing strategies for forced acquisition. Proof that the Thornton family had known exactly what existed beneath this land for nearly 40 years. They've been planning this since before you were born. Your uncle's death wasn't an accident. They hired someone to pressure him, to make him scared enough to sell. When intimidation failed, Jennifer couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah's chest went cold. You have proof of murder? Not proof that would hold up in court, but enough to raise serious questions. Thomas Thornton's private files mention resolving the Mitchell problem permanently 3 weeks before your uncle died. Richard inherited those files, that obsession, that willingness to remove obstacles. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm done being part of it, and because you need leverage. Jennifer gestured to the documents. Use these, fight back, but don't say where you got them. I'll deny everything. I have to. She left as quietly as she had arrived, taillights disappearing down the mountain road. Sarah stood holding evidence that could destroy Thornton, purchased with one woman's conscience, finally finding its breaking point. In the morning, she called Detective Maria Rodriguez with the North Carolina State Police. The woman who answered had the weary competence of someone who'd seen corruption wearing respectable clothes too many times. Ms. Mitchell, I've been following your case. County corruption is my specialty. What you described in court yesterday, I've seen it before. Not usually this brazen, but the pattern matches. I have new evidence, documents proving Richard Thornton's family has been targeting my property since 1985. And Sarah hesitated, then committed. Possible evidence related to my uncle's death. Rodriguez's tone sharpened. I'll be there tomorrow. Don't discuss this with local law enforcement. Thornton has connections there. The detective arrived the next afternoon, professional and thorough, taking statements, photographing documents, treating Sarah's allegations with the seriousness they deserved. She was particularly interested in Jennifer's materials, the proof of decades-long conspiracy. This changes things. If I can connect your uncle's death to Thornton's acquisition attempts, we're looking at murder charges. Rodriguez met Sarah's eyes, but investigations take time. Months, maybe longer. Can you stay safe that long? Sarah thought about the cabin's isolation, Emma's vulnerability, Thornton's willingness to threaten children in parking lots. I don't know. Then we need to move faster. Rodriguez pulled out her phone, made calls to people Sarah couldn't identify, conversations in law enforcement shorthand, references to cases and statutes and procedures designed to protect endangered witnesses. 3 days passed in strange suspension. Frank and his unit took shifts watching the property. Sarah kept Emma close, limiting her exploration, teaching her to recognize danger signs. Dakota rarely left the girl's side, the dog's protective instincts heightened by tension even animals could sense. On the 4th day, Emma made the discovery that changed everything. She was exploring the cabin's attic, a space Sarah had barely examined, filled with decades of accumulated possessions. Emma's voice called down through the narrow opening, excited and scared at once. Mom, there's another room up here, a hidden one. Sarah climbed the rickety ladder, finding Emma standing before a section of wall that looked identical to its surroundings. Except the nails were newer, the boards slightly different shades. Emma had noticed what adults had missed, what her uncle had intended only desperate people to find. Behind the false wall, a second sealed room, smaller than the first, but infinitely more valuable. Every surface covered with documentation. Photographs of Thornton's grandfather trespassing on the property, date stamps proving illegal surveys, audio recordings on cassette tapes, voices faint but audible through decades of magnetic decay, conversations where threats were made explicitly, violence discussed as business strategy, and a journal separate from the others. James Mitchell's final entries, dated the week before his death. October 15, 224. Richard Thornton visited today. Not his lawyers, not his intermediaries. Him. He was direct in ways his grandfather never was. Old men fall easily in mountains, he said, especially ones who wander alone at night. He thinks I'm afraid, but fear stopped mattering years ago. I've already made arrangements. If I die, everything goes to Sarah. She'll know what to do. October 18th, 2024. Checked my equipment today. Boots, hiking stick, emergency beacon. If something happens, if I fall, there will be evidence. Body position, tool marks, witness statements from Frank. I won't let them erase me quietly. October 20th, 2024. This is probably my last entry. Richard has been circling closer, his patience exhausted. I'm an old man standing between him and a fortune he believes he deserves. The math isn't complicated. But neither is morality. Some things are worth dying to protect. I just hope Sarah is strong enough to live protecting them. Sarah's hands shook, reading her uncle's acceptance of his own murder, his clinical documentation of threats, his preparation of evidence, his faith that she would continue what he'd started. She called Rodriguez immediately. The detective arrived with a forensics team, treating the attic room like a crime scene, photographing everything, cataloging evidence with the care of someone building an unshakable case. This is enough for a warrant, probably enough for charges. Rodriguez looked at Sarah with something like respect. Your uncle was meticulous. He built you a roadmap. Can you exhume him? Verify it wasn't an accident? Already filed the paperwork. Judge approved it this morning. We'll have results in a week. That week stretched like rubber under tension. Sarah continued the cabin's restoration, needing physical work to burn through anxiety that kept her awake most nights. Emma stayed close, the girl's natural exuberance dampened by adult fears she was too young to carry. Frank brought news of Thornton's movements. The developer was liquidating assets, preparing for legal battle or flight. His attorneys were distancing themselves, recognizing the case had moved beyond civil disputes into criminal territory. The forensics report arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Rodriguez delivered it in person, her expression grave. Exhumation confirmed what your uncle suspected. Blunt force trauma to the back of his skull, pattern inconsistent with falling injuries. Boot treads on his clothing don't match his own footwear. Defensive wounds on his hands suggest he fought back. She paused. James Mitchell was murdered, and we have evidence pointing directly at Richard Thornton. Sarah felt something in her chest simultaneously expand and contract. Vindication mixed with grief for an uncle she'd never met, never known, who died protecting land she'd inherited by accident. When will you arrest him? Tonight. We're coordinating with federal marshals. Thornton has resources and connections. We can't risk local interference. But Thornton had resources Sarah hadn't anticipated. That evening, as twilight painted the mountains purple and gold, vehicles approached the cabin. Not police, not attorneys. Thornton himself, flanked by two men whose body language screamed hired violence, desperation making them bold in ways legal pressure couldn't. Frank appeared from the tree line, rifle ready, positioning himself between the cabin and threat. Sarah grabbed Emma, pulling her back from windows, hard hammering. Thornton's voice cut through evening stillness. Give me James's documents, the real ones, the ones Emma found. They belong to me, Sarah responded from inside the cabin, voice steadier than her hands. They're with the police, along with evidence that you murdered my uncle. Liar. I know the girl found something. I have people who tell me things. His facade of control cracked further. That land is mine. Those deposits are mine. Your uncle stole them by refusing to sell. You can't steal what's already yours. Thornton pulled a gun, the weapon looking wrong in his manicured hands. Frank's rifle rose in response. One of Thornton's men drew his own weapon. Standoff in fading light, 3 armed men and 2 trapped women with a child caught between greed and protection. We're leaving. Through the back, Sarah whispered to Emma, grabbing the backpack she'd kept prepared since Thornton's first threat. Documents sealed in plastic, emergency supplies, everything they'd need to reach Frank's cabin 2 miles through forest. Emma moved quietly, fear making her obedient. They slipped out the cabin's rear window, while Frank kept Thornton's attention focused forward. Dakota waited in the trees, her presence a silent promise of guidance and protection. The forest swallowed them quickly, mountain darkness absolute under tree cover. Sarah navigated by flashlight and memory, following paths Frank had shown her during quieter days. Emma stayed close, one hand clutching Sarah's jacket, the other buried in Dakota's fur. Behind them, voices shouted. Flashlight beams cut through undergrowth, searching. Thornton's hired men crashing through vegetation with urban clumsiness, making noise that gave away position and direction. Sarah led them off the main trail, trusting instinct and geology knowledge to find paths through terrain that would slow pursuers. They climbed higher, heading toward the ravine system where her uncle had died, where rock formations provided cover and confusion in equal measure. The ravine opened before them suddenly, a crack in the earth 50 feet deep and twice as wide, moonlight turning it into a chasm of shadow and exposed stone. Sarah remembered Frank's stories about this place, James's final location, where something terrible had happened that local authorities called accident. Cornered. Men's voices drawing closer, flashlights sweeping through trees on three sides. The ravine at their backs, no way down in darkness without equipment they didn't have. Thornton emerged from the tree line, breathing hard, guns still in hand. His expensive clothes were torn, face scratched by branches, all pretense of civilization stripped away by obsession and fear of consequences. Your uncle wouldn't give me the land, so I gave him a push, right here, right into this ravine. His words came out ragged, confession emerging through exhausted rage. Now you're going to have the same accident. Mother and daughter, tragic loss. Property goes to public auction, where I can finally buy it legally. Sarah positioned herself between Thornton and Emma, mind racing through options that all ended badly. Frank was back at the cabin, unaware they'd fled here. Rodriguez was miles away, preparing arrests that would come too late. They were alone with a murderer who'd already killed once and saw no reason not to again. Emma's small hand found Sarah's. The girl wasn't crying, wasn't panicking, just holding on, trusting her mother to find a way through impossible circumstances. You won't get away with this. Everything is documented, sent to people who will know exactly what happened. Documentation can be disputed. Accidents are accidents. Thornton raised the gun, amateur grip but deadly at this range. I'm sorry it came to this, but some fortunes are worth any price. Then helicopter rotors cut through night air, searchlights blazing across the ravine like manufactured dawn. Rodriguez's voice through a bullhorn, amplified and absolute. Richard Thornton, you're surrounded! Drop your weapon! Police everywhere suddenly, emerging from forests like special forces in rehearsed operation. Federal marshals, state police, coordination that had been planned and executed while Sarah ran. Rodriguez had been tracking them, protecting them, letting Thornton reveal himself completely. Thornton spun toward the helicopters, toward the lights, toward the realization that escape had evaporated. He stumbled backward, too close to the ravine edge, ground crumbling under his expensive shoes. Sarah watched him teeter, saw the moment when gravity claimed what balance couldn't hold, saw him start to fall into the same darkness that had taken her uncle. Her body moved before thought finished forming. She lunged forward, caught Thornton's hand, felt his weight drag against her grip. Emma screamed. Dakota barked. Officers shouted, "Pull me up, please!" Terror replaced rage in Thornton's eyes. The man reduced a frightened animal facing death he'd dealt to others. Sarah held him, muscles straining, choice crystallizing in seconds that felt like hours. She could let go, claim accident, give him the fate he'd given her uncle. Justice through gravity and poetic completion. Emma's voice cut through the chaos, high and clear. Mom, don't! He's evil! But Sarah tightened her grip, braced her legs, pulled with everything she had. Officers reached them, grabbed Thornton, hauled him back from the edge. Arrested him immediately, hands cuffed while he gasped and trembled. Saved by the woman he'd tried to murder. Rodriguez approached as other officers led Thornton toward waiting vehicles, his hired men already secured and silent. The detective's expression mixed respect and curiosity. You could have let him fall. No one would have blamed you. I know. Sarah pulled Emma close, feeling her daughter's heartbeat against her ribs, fast and alive and precious. But I'm not like him, and I won't teach my daughter that murder is justice, no matter how deserved. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Richard Thornton, you're under arrest for the murder of James Mitchell, attempted murder of Sarah and Emma Mitchell, conspiracy, intimidation, and about a dozen other charges we'll add as we build the case. You have the right to remain silent. The Miranda rights faded into background noise as Sarah held Emma, both of them shaking with adrenaline and relief in the particular exhaustion that comes after surviving what should have killed you. Thornton looked back at her once before officers pushed him into a vehicle, his expression unreadable. Not gratitude exactly, but recognition. Understanding that Sarah's mercy had condemned him more thoroughly than her revenge ever could. Frank appeared from the trees, moving faster than his age suggested possible, relief visible even in darkness. He wrapped both Mitchell women in his arms, protective presence that had kept them alive through weeks of siege. It's over, really over. But Sarah knew better. Endings were never clean. Thornton would face trial, years of legal proceedings, appeals and motions, and attempts to reduce consequences. The community would take sides, some supporting the powerful man brought low, others celebrating his downfall. The cabin still needed months of work. Winter was coming, money remained scarce. The battle was over. The war of survival continued. They walked back through the forest together, Frank leading with a confidence built from decades of mountain living, Dakota ranging ahead, Emma holding Sarah's hand with grip that suggested she might never let go. At the cabin, Rodriguez coordinated with her team, collecting evidence, documenting the crime scene, building cases that would occupy courtrooms for years. She pulled Sarah aside as dawn began painting the eastern sky. You'll need to testify. Multiple trials, depositions, probably years of legal entanglement. A pause. But we'll protect you, witness security if necessary, though I don't think Thornton's network will risk further action. He's toxic now, too dangerous to help. What about the property, the deposits? That's yours to decide. State Geological Survey wants to study it. University researchers are interested. Conservation groups see potential for protected status. Rodriguez smiled slightly. You have options now, the kind your uncle wanted you to have. Options, not wealth, but choices. The difference mattered. 2 years passed like seasons learned to count themselves. Winter came and went twice. Spring returned with different promises. Summer taught lessons about persistence, rewarding patience. The cabin transformed under Sarah's hands, guided by Frank's expertise, and funded by choices that honored her uncle's legacy rather than exploiting it. The State Geological Survey had purchased mineral rights for $3 million, money that came with ironclad conservation easements, preventing extraction. The deposits would remain where James Mitchell had left them, studied by researchers but never touched by corporate greed. Sarah kept surface rights, the land itself, 40 acres of mountain wilderness that had become more home than any address she'd occupied before. The cabin barely resembled its former ruin. New roof, solid and weather-tight, windows that actually opened, letting in air instead of rain. Foundation reinforced, porch rebuilt level and true. Inside, walls glowed with fresh paint. Floors gleamed under refinished wood. The old wood stove worked properly after Frank's patient restoration. Every improvement carried intention, craftsmanship replacing desperation's quick fixes. A new building stood beside the cabin, workshop and classroom combined. Solar panels caught mountain sunlight, converting it to power that kept computers and equipment running. Sign above the entrance, Mitchell Carver Mountain Heritage Site. Educational facility. Sarah ran geology programs 3 days weekly, hosting school groups who arrived in buses, their teachers grateful for hands-on learning that textbooks couldn't provide. She taught children about mineral formation, geological time, the patience required for stones to become something precious, about choosing preservation over exploitation, stewardship over ownership. Her book had helped. The memoir she'd written during the trial, documenting everything from whistleblower persecution to Thornton's arrest, had found unexpected readership. Not a bestseller, but steady sales, reviews calling it inspiring, necessary, a testament to ordinary courage against extraordinary pressure. The advance in royalties had filled gaps that conservation money couldn't, allowing Sarah to build rather than merely survive. Emma appeared from the workshop, now 12 and grown into confidence that mountains and purpose had cultivated. She wore a junior ranger vest, gift from Frank's connections with the Park Service, leading a group of younger children on a trail walk. Her voice carried authority beyond her years, explaining tree identification, animal tracking, leave no trace principles with practiced ease. Dakota Jr. trotted beside her, a 2-year-old German shepherd who'd inherited her predecessor's intelligence and protective instincts. The original Dakota had passed the previous spring, old age claiming her peacefully in sleep. Emma had wept for days, then asked to adopt a puppy from the same bloodline, continuing connection to the dog who'd helped save their lives. Frank emerged from his cottage, smaller structure Sarah had built on the property's northern edge. He lived there now, officially, his own place deeper in the mountains sold to fund the heritage site's equipment. At 69, he showed no signs of slowing, teaching wilderness survival workshops, maintaining trail systems, serving as the site's manager with title and small salary that gave purpose to his veteran's pension. Tour group arriving in 20 minutes, he announced, checking his watch with military precision. University students from Chapel Hill. Advanced geology class. Sarah felt familiar nervousness flutter in her chest. University groups meant peers, professionals who might judge her credentials, might question her authority to teach. Old insecurities from the whistleblower years, when her expertise had been dismissed as hysteria. You've got this. Frank's hand on her shoulder carried steady reassurance. You know this material better than anyone, and you've earned respect the hard way. The students arrived curious and skeptical in equal measure. Their professor, a woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Dr. Catherine Lynn, specialist in mineralogy and geological ethics. Sarah recognized the name from academic journals she'd read during her former career. The tour covered the property's geological formations, careful to show evidence without revealing exact deposit locations. Sarah explained her uncle's documentation, his decades of study, his choice to protect rather than profit. Students asked sharp questions, testing her knowledge, and Sarah answered with precision earned from experience rather than just education. Dr. Lynn stayed after her students departed, walking the property with the careful attention of someone seeing patterns others missed. She paused at the creek where Emma had found the first stone where everything had begun. Your uncle was right. This formation is remarkable. Mining it would have been catastrophic, not just environmentally but scientifically. Preserved like this, it offers research value that extraction would have destroyed. She turned to Sarah, expression thoughtful. I read your book about Copper Valley, the whistleblower case. Sarah braced for judgment that never came. You were right about those safety violations. The investigation confirmed everything you'd reported. New regulations passed because of your testimony, implemented across the industry. 2 deaths prevented, probably hundreds more, in accidents that won't happen now. Dr. Lynn's voice carried weight of someone who understood consequences. What you did mattered. What you're doing here matters. Academia needs people who remember that knowledge serves life, not profit. Something in Sarah's chest released, tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying for 3 years. Validation from a source that couldn't be dismissed, couldn't be bought or intimidated. I just wish I'd saved those 2 men. You honored them by never stopping. That's what heroes do. They keep fighting even after battles cost everything. After Dr. Lynn left, Sarah sat on the workshop steps, Emma beside her, DJ's head resting on the girl's lap. The afternoon sun painted everything gold, the particular light that made mountains look eternal and human struggles feel appropriately small. Mom, I've been thinking about my science project for state competition. Yeah? I want to study gemstone formation in our deposit. Using Great Uncle James's journals, your geological surveys, compare them to current research. Show why some treasures should stay hidden. Emma's enthusiasm built as she outlined her vision. I'll call it The Legacy in the Stones, Why Some Treasures Should Stay Hidden. Sarah pulled her daughter close, pride and love tangling into something that made breathing difficult. Your great uncle would approve. Emma worked on the project through fall and winter, Sarah and Frank helping with research, technical documentation, presentation design. The girl approached it with scientific rigor that belied her age, understanding that excellence mattered when defending choices others questioned. The state science fair took place in Raleigh, massive convention center filled with projects competing for scholarships and recognition. Emma presented with poise that made Sarah's throat tight, explaining geological processes, ethical considerations, the difference between value and worth. Judges asked challenging questions. Emma answered without hesitation, her conviction born from living the story she presented. When they announced winners, her name came second in her division. Impressive for a 12-year-old competing against high schoolers. But the real prize came afterward. Emma donated her award money to establish the James Mitchell Conservation Scholarship, funding students pursuing environmental protection careers. $500 seemed small until the university matched it. Then a conservation nonprofit added more, transforming Emma's gesture into something that would help students for years. Sarah watched her daughter shake hands with university officials, accepting their congratulations, and understood that teaching happened through action more than words. Emma had learned not from lectures but from watching her mother choose hard integrity over easy compromise. Spring arrived with warmth that promised summer. Frank was splitting firewood behind his cottage when he stopped, hand pressed to his chest, face going gray. Sarah, working in the garden, looked up and knew immediately something was wrong. She ran, reaching him as he collapsed to his knees, breathing labored and shallow. Emma called 911 while Sarah supported Frank's weight, talking him through the panic that made heart problems worse. "Stay with me. Breathe slow. Help is coming." The ambulance took 40 minutes to reach them, mountain roads making speed impossible. Paramedics worked efficiently, stabilizing Frank, loading him for transport. Sarah rode with him, Emma and DJ following in their truck. The hospital in Asheville became temporary home. Frank's heart attack wasn't severe, doctors said, but it was warning. Arterial blockage requiring stents, medication changes, lifestyle modifications that someone Frank's age needed to take seriously. Sarah and Emma maintained vigil, taking turns sleeping in the waiting room chair, refusing to leave until doctors confirmed he'd survive. On the third day, Frank woke fully, awareness returning to eyes that had been clouded with medication and pain. "You're crying. Don't cry. Takes more than a weak heart to kill stubborn." His voice came rough but steady. "You scared us." Sarah gripped his hand, feeling bones too prominent beneath skin, realizing properly for the first time that Frank was old, mortal, wouldn't always be their mountain guardian. "Scared myself," he looked at Emma, who'd pressed close to his bedside. "But I'm not done yet. Still have too much to teach this one." Emma's tears came freely. "You can't die, Grandpa Frank. You're not allowed." The word hung in hospital air, grandmother's term of endearment spoken naturally, claiming relationship that biology hadn't created, but love had forged. Frank's expression crumbled into something vulnerable and grateful and overwhelmed. "Grandpa Frank." I like the sound of that. They brought him home after a week, installing him in the cottage with instructions about rest, diet, cardiac rehabilitation. Sarah and Emma took turns checking on him, preparing meals, forcing compliance with medical orders he wanted to ignore. One evening, Sarah found Frank on his porch, watching sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. She settled beside him, comfortable in silence they'd learned to share. "I never had children. Military life, then mountain isolation, never seemed right to bring someone into that." Frank's voice carried reflection rather than regret. "But you two, you're my family now, more real than blood could make it. You're not just Emma's grandpa, you're my father." Sarah's words emerged from place she hadn't known existed until speaking them. "The one I needed, when I needed him most." "Then make it official." Frank turned to her, expression serious. "Let me adopt Emma. Let her carry my name alongside yours. Mitchell Carver. Legacy from both families." Sarah's throat closed around tears that came from gratitude rather than grief. "Emma would love that. I would love that." The legal process took months, but bureaucracy couldn't diminish meaning. The day the paperwork finalized, they celebrated with cake from the bakery in town. Emma delighted to officially become Emma Mitchell Carver. Her identity expanded to include the man who'd protected them when protection mattered most. Summer brought plans for formal dedication of the heritage site. 2 years of operation had proven the concept viable, educational programs running successfully, research partnerships established with 3 universities. Time to celebrate publicly, invite the community that had watched their struggle and eventual triumph. Sarah coordinated with state officials, conservation groups, local dignitaries who wanted association with success story that reflected well on everyone. Invitations went to people who'd helped, who'd stood firm when Thornton's influence could have swayed them toward easier positions. The day arrived perfect, early September warmth without summer's oppressive heat. Folding chairs arranged on the workshop lawn, podium positioned to face mountains that had witnessed everything. 200 people gathered, mixture of supporters, students, professionals, curious locals who remembered Thornton's downfall and wanted to see what rose from that collapse. Sarah stood before them, notes prepared but barely consulted, speaking from heart instead of script. 2 years ago, I inherited land I'd never seen from an uncle I'd never met. I came here desperate, broke, running from a life that had collapsed around me. What I found was more than property. I found purpose." She gestured toward the cabin, transformed from ruin to testament. "My uncle spent 30 years protecting something precious. Not because of what it was worth, but because some things are worth more when left alone." She told the story carefully, honoring truth without exploiting drama. James's dedication, Thornton's obsession, the choice between wealth and integrity that every generation faces in different forms. We're taught that finding treasure means cashing in, that value exists to be extracted and spent. But my uncle understood different mathematics. Protection multiplies worth instead of dividing it. Preservation creates legacy that money only pretends to buy. Emma joined her mother at the podium, poised despite youth, speaking about her own journey from scared child to confident steward. "I used to think being rich meant having money. Now I know being rich means having purpose, place people who matter. We're the wealthiest family I know, and we don't have much in the bank." Applause rippled through the audience. Genuine appreciation for sentiment that transcended cliché through lived experience. Officials spoke, praising conservation, education, community benefit. Frank received recognition for his role. Veteran who'd served his country, then served his mountains with equal dedication. The mayor proclaimed it James Mitchell Day, county resolution honoring the man who died protecting what he loved. After official ceremonies concluded, guests wandered the property, examining displays, walking trails, experiencing what their tax dollars and Sarah's determination had created. Sarah moved through crowds accepting congratulations, feeling surreal distance between current reality and desperate woman who'd arrived here with eviction notice and dying hope. Later, as crowds thinned and evening approached, Sarah took Emma and Frank to her uncle's grave. They'd moved him from the public cemetery to private plot on the property, location he'd specified in his will, wanting to rest where he'd lived. The new headstone was granite, carved with simple inscription: James Mitchell, Guardian of the Mountain, 1949 to 2024, his legacy lives on. Emma placed stones on the grave, tradition she'd learned from researching her heritage, Mitchell family customs or hadn't known they'd had. Frank stood silent, paying respects to friend who trusted him with everything that mattered. Where knelt, hand against cool stone, speaking to uncle she'd never heard respond, but somehow always felt present. "I understand now why you chose me, not because I was a geologist, though that helped, because I knew what it cost to lose everything for doing the right thing, because I'd already proven I'd choose integrity over easy survival." Her voice caught. "You gave me a second chance. I won't waste it." Emma noticed something Sarah had missed, pulling her mother's attention to the headstone's rear face. Words carved there, smaller, more personal. "For Sarah, you found the real treasure. Love, James." The inscription was dated 3 weeks before his death. He'd pre-ordered the stone, knowing, preparing, ensuring she'd eventually understand that he'd watched her life, believed in her character, trusted her with his greatest secret because she had already proven trustworthy in flames that destroyed lesser metals. Sarah broke then, tears coming from place deeper than grief, mixing loss and gratitude, an overwhelming recognition of being seen, truly seen, by someone who'd had faith when she'd lost it herself. Frank's arms came around her. Emma pressed close, 3 people holding each other beside a grave that represented beginning instead of ending. Legacy wasn't what you left behind. Legacy was what you built from what you had been given. 5 years later, the property had grown into something beyond initial vision. Educational programs now serve 15 schools across 3 counties. Research partnerships had expanded to include international geology programs. The site employed 4 staff members beyond Sarah and Frank, making it sustainable rather than merely personal. Emma, now 17, wore full junior ranger uniform with deserved pride. She led advanced wilderness workshops, taught navigation and survival skills with competence that made experienced outdoorsmen respect her expertise. College acceptances had arrived from multiple universities, all offering scholarships for environmental science programs. But Emma was considering gap year first, spending time deepening her connection to land that had shaped her. "I'll go to college, but I want to be sure I'm going because it's right for me, not because it's what I'm supposed to do." She sat with Sarah on the workshop steps. DJ7, 3rd generation German Shepherd carrying the lineage, sleeping between them. Great Uncle James took his time. You took yours. I want mine. Sarah recognized her own words reflected back. Lessons about choosing deliberately rather than defaulting to expectations. Whatever you decide, you have our support, and this place will always be here. Frank's 74th birthday brought celebration that reflected his integration into community fabric. Veteran friends, church members, former students, conservation colleagues, people who'd come to value the gruff man who taught through example rather than lecture. He moved slower now, heart medications and age taking their toll, but his spirit remained sharp, his dedication undiminished. During the party, he pulled Sarah aside, expression carrying seriousness that made her chest tighten. Got my affairs in order. Will updated, cottage deed transferred to you, everything squared away. He raised a hand against her protest. Not planning to die soon, but heart attacks make you realistic. When my time comes, I want to be buried beside James. And I want you to know you made these last years worth living. I came to these mountains to hide from the world. You taught me the world was worth fighting for. Sarah couldn't speak around the lump in her throat, could only hug him fiercely, feeling fragile bones beneath flannel shirt, understanding that time was gift, not guarantee. Her own achievements had accumulated quietly. Appointment to State Conservation Board, advising on policy protecting geological formations from destructive mining, published articles in environmental journals, respected voice on balancing economic need with preservation imperative. Speaking engagements at universities, conferences, anywhere people cared about stewarding resources rather than merely exploiting them. She'd even started dating, tentative relationship with geology professor from NC State who understood her history, respected her priorities, didn't push for more than she was ready to give. Martin was patient, kind, shared her passion for rocks and conservation, made Emma laugh with terrible puns. Not a replacement for the marriage that had failed, but maybe foundation for something healthier, built on mutual respect rather than naive expectations. One afternoon in late summer, vehicles struggling up the mountain road drew Sarah's attention. Not the confident SUVs of regular visitors, but tired sedan that had seen better decades. Woman emerged, 40-something, worn clothes and wearier expression. Young boy climbed out behind her, maybe 8, eyes too old for his face. They looked mocked, desperate, or carrying defeat in their postures that Sarah recognized from her own arrival 5 years prior. Emma greeted them with professional friendliness. "Welcome! Are you here for a tour?" The woman's laugh came sharp and bitter. "Actually, I think I'm lost. GPS brought me here, but I'm looking for property I inherited. 40 acres somewhere nearby, cabin that needs work." Sarah's heart kicked against her ribs, recognition firing through her nervous system. Different faces, same story, history repeating itself with variations on theme. "Come inside, let's talk." Over coffee, the story emerged. Inherited property from distant uncle, never met him, woman recently divorced, lost her job, eviction pending, considering selling to local developer who'd made generous offer, man named Patterson who seemed very interested in acquiring the specific land. Sarah and Frank exchanged glances, the kind of silent communication years of partnership enabled. Different names, same pattern. Predators always circled, waiting for vulnerable prey. "What did your uncle do before he died?" "Some kind of scientist, I think. Environmental research. My lawyer said he left everything to me because I worked in water treatment, said I'd understand about protecting resources." The woman who'd introduced herself as Rebecca looked embarrassed. "I just need money, honestly. Can't afford to be noble." Her son spoke up, first words since arriving. "Aunt Rebecca, the man who wants to buy our land was mean. He called Mom stupid for not selling faster." Sarah knelt beside the boy, seeing Emma's younger self in his frightened defiance. "What's your name?" "Tyler." "Tyler, I'm going to tell you a story. It starts with a woman who thought she'd lost everything and ends with her finding what mattered most." She looked at Rebecca, then Emma, then Frank. "Would you like to hear it?" They moved to the porch, Sarah beginning to speak, weaving narrative that had become both testimony and teaching. Rebecca listened with growing attention, Tyler absorbed in tale of mice and threats and choices between easy money and hard integrity. When Sarah finished, Rebecca was quiet for a long time, watching mountains shift colors in fading light. Your uncle left you this place because he knew you'd protect it. Mine left me land because he thought I'd understand about water tables, ecosystem protection, things being worth more than their sale price. She looked at her son. What am I teaching Tyler if I sell out at the first hardship? I can help. Sarah heard her own voice offering assistance her budget didn't comfortably allow. Connect you with conservation groups, universities that might want research partnerships, legal resources that protected me. It won't be easy, but it's possible. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Because someone helped me when I needed it. Because teaching Tyler that running toward problems instead of away from them matters. Because your uncle trusted you the same way mine trusted me, and that trust deserves honoring. Emma appeared with DJ7, the dog immediately approaching Tyler with careful friendliness. The boy's face transformed, lighting with first genuine smile since arriving. Is this your dog? Want to pet her? She's really good at finding treasures. What kind of treasures? Emma smiled, wisdom beyond 17 years evident in her expression. The kind you can't spend. Come on, I'll show you. Sarah watched them walk toward the trails, girl and boy and dog, beginning journeys similar to one she and Emma had traveled. Rebecca stood beside her, both women understanding that some stories echoed across time, each generation learning lessons previous ones had taught through survival. I don't know if I can do this. Be as strong as you were. You won't do it alone, and strength isn't what you think. It's just showing up tomorrow when today broke you. Doing that enough times until tomorrow stops breaking you quite so hard. Frank joined them, three people watching teenagers explore property that represented more than acreage and mineral rights. Rebecca asked questions, practical ones about funding, legal protection, community support. Sarah and Frank answered with hard-won knowledge, offering roadmap through terrain they had already crossed. As evening settled into night, Rebecca and Tyler prepared to leave, promised to return tomorrow for more detailed discussion. The boy hugged Emma goodbye, already bonded through shared understanding of what it meant when adults' worlds collapsed around children who had to stay brave despite fear. After they left, Sarah stood with Emma and Frank on the porch, 3 generations of found family watching stars emerge above mountains that had witnessed their transformation. Emma spoke first, her voice thoughtful. That's going to be us, helping her the way Grandpa Frank helped you. Legacy isn't just what we preserve, it's what we pass forward. Frank settled into his chair, DJ curled at his feet, satisfaction evident in his weathered features. Your uncle would be proud. You didn't just protect his work, you multiplied it. Sarah thought about James's journal entries, his careful documentation of decades spent guarding something precious. Thought about Emma's scholarship helping students pursue conservation careers. About Rebecca's inheritance, another person standing at crossroads where choosing correctly mattered more than choosing easily. She thought about the deposits still beneath cabin foundation. Millions of dollars in gemstones that would never see market, never be worn or sold or converted to currency that bought temporary satisfaction. Thought about wealth measured in purpose. Legacy calculated through generations. Treasure that grew more valuable specifically because it remained untouched. Her voice emerged quiet but certain, words finding rhythm that felt like closing and beginning simultaneously. I came to these mountains to escape, thought I was running away from everything I'd lost. But what I found wasn't wealth or danger or even redemption. I found family, and sometimes that's the most valuable thing you can dig up from the earth. Emma leaned against her shoulder. Frank's hand found Sarah's. 3 people holding each other under stars that had watched this land long before Mitchell, family claimed it, would watch it long after their bones joined James's beneath grateful soil. Inside the cabin, lights glowed warm against mountain darkness. The heritage site stood testament to choices favoring preservation over exploitation. Trails wound through wilderness that remained wild because people had decided some things were worth protecting more than profiting from. And beneath it all, stones lay undisturbed, their value multiplied infinitely by remaining exactly where they'd been formed millions of years prior, pressure and time creating beauty that existed to be appreciated, not owned. Morning would bring new challenges, continued maintenance of legacy that required constant tending. Rebecca would return with questions, fears, hopes that Sarah would help navigate because she remembered how it felt to stand alone against pressure designed to break resistance. Students would arrive for scheduled programs, eager to learn lessons about geology and ethics and the difference between worth and price. Frank would teach survival skills to children who needed to understand that thriving meant more than merely existing. But tonight, this moment, Sarah allowed herself stillness. Allowed herself to recognize that the woman who'd arrived here 5 years prior, broke, desperate, defeated, had been replaced by someone who measured wealth in impact, success in sustainability, victory in simply showing up tomorrow, ready to do the work that mattered. The stones beneath her feet held millions. The life she'd built above them was priceless. And Emma, her daughter who'd learned to measure treasure and purpose instead of price, represented legacy worth more than any deposit could purchase. James Mitchell had known, had seen this future, prepared this path, trusted Sarah to walk it when walking felt impossible. His gift hadn't been land or gemstones or even cabin that became home. His gift had been faith that she possessed strength she didn't recognize in herself, integrity that would guide her through darkness toward light he wouldn't live to witness. Sarah whispered to mountains that had become more family than landscape, "Thank you." And from somewhere deep in earth, from stone and time and the patience of geological eternity, something answered back. Not words exactly, but recognition, approval, welcome, home.